An alien baron mocked a human with his paralyzed daughter until he treated her with dignity. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Ethan Walker stood just inside the threshold of the vaulted hall, boots planted on polished alloy that reflected the ceiling lights like frozen stars. The air smelled faintly of coolant and ozone, a clean sharp scent that told him the power grid here was newer than most frontier stations. His coveralls were smudged with grease from the shuttle bay, sleeves rolled to the forearms, fingers still warm from a diagnostic panel he'd wrestled with 10 minutes earlier. He hadn't expected an audience. He especially hadn't expected the chair. It sat a few yards to the right of the central dais, not centered, not honored, but placed where it wouldn't interrupt traffic. A low-profile grav chair, functional and bare, its field humming just enough to keep it a foot above the floor. In it sat a young alien woman with green skin that caught the light like jade and eyes that glowed a soft, unmistakable violet. Her long green hair spilled over the chair's back in a careful braid, neat in a way that suggested habit rather than vanity. She was very still, hands folded, posture straight, as if movement itself required permission. Baron Kaelrixvorn reclined above her, elongated form draped in ceremonial fabric, one clawed hand resting on the arm of his seat. His voice carried easily, smooth and amused, and when he laughed it echoed once before the hall swallowed it. Ethan understood enough of the local tongue to catch the tone even before the translator in his ear finished its work. This was not a place where laughter meant warmth. The Baron gestured with casual precision toward the chair as if it were an object on display. You see, he said to no one in particular, even imperfections have their uses. A few attendants shifted. No one spoke. Ethan felt the familiar instinct. To keep his head down, do the job, collect the credits, and leave orbit before local politics found a way to complicate his life. He had crossed 3 systems repairing reactors and life support rings, learned when to speak and when silence paid better. But silence, he realized, was already doing enough damage here. He didn't look at the Baron when he stepped forward. He looked at the woman in the chair. He noticed the way the overhead lights cast a glare straight into her eyes, the way the grav field hummed just a little too strong for comfort, the way her gaze flicked to the floor whenever the Baron spoke, as if she were trying to become smaller than she already was. Ethan stopped an arm's length away and lowered himself until he was at her eye level, the motion slow and deliberate. Metal creaked softly as his knee touched the floor. The hall went quiet, not with command, but with surprise. "Hi," he said, voice steady, using standard because it felt right. "I'm Ethan. Are you comfortable here?" The question hung in the air, simple and out of place. The woman blinked once. No one had asked her anything since he'd arrived. She hesitated, then shook her head almost imperceptibly. Ethan nodded, as if that answer mattered more than anything the Baron could say. He reached for the chair's side panel without touching her, fingers moving with practiced care, dialing down the field strength, angling the seat so the light no longer cut across her face. The hum softened. She exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Above them, the Baron's amusement curdled. "You presume much, human," Kaelrix said. Ethan finally looked up, meeting the alien noble's gaze without challenge, without fear. "I fix things," he replied. "Sometimes that starts with asking what hurts." He turned back to the woman and offered a small, respectful smile. "What's your name?" For the first time, her violet eyes lifted fully. "Lyra," she said, voice quiet but clear. Ethan repeated it, getting the sound right, as if it deserved care. Around them, the hall remained silent, but something had shifted. Not power. Not authority. Something smaller, and far more dangerous to the way things had always been. Ethan stayed where he was for a moment longer than protocol allowed, long enough for the quiet to become noticeable. Lyra's name lingered in the air, not echoed, just present, as if the hall itself was adjusting to the idea that it had been spoken without permission. He rose smoothly, joints popping softly after hours on cold metal decks, and turned back to the work console the Baron had summoned him for, not because he had been dismissed, but because the job still needed doing. The power conduit along the east wall flickered at irregular intervals, a minor fault, but enough to irritate someone used to absolute control. Ethan opened the panel, the scent of warmed insulation drifting out, and began rerouting the flow with steady hands. He did not rush. He did not glance back to see if the Baron was watching. He could feel it anyway, the weight of attention sharp as a held breath. Lyra watched him too, though more cautiously, her gaze following the simple competence of his movements, the way he paused before tightening a bolt, listening to the system, as if it might speak back. No one had ever taken that much time with anything around her. When the light steadied, the hall brightened by a fraction, cleaner, less harsh. The Baron made a dismissive sound. "You humans take pride in menial tasks," Kael'ric said. "Fixing what should never fail." Ethan closed the panel and wiped his hands on a cloth. "Things fail," he replied. "People too. That is usually when they need the most care." He said it without edge, like stating the weather. A ripple of discomfort passed through the attendants. Lyra felt it before she understood it, the subtle shift of bodies, the way a few sets of eyes darted away from her chair as if seeing her fully for the first time was somehow dangerous. She adjusted her hands, then stopped when Ethan noticed the movement and waited, patient, giving her space to finish. "The hum," she said softly, nodding toward the chair. "It is quieter now." "It should be," Ethan said. "That model is rated for about 150 pounds of sustained lift. They had it set almost double. No reason for that." He frowned, not accusing, just thoughtful, and made a note on his wrist display. Kael'ric's crest flared faintly, color deepening. "You speak as if you have authority here." Ethan met his gaze again, calm as ever. "No, sir. I speak as someone who noticed." The difference mattered. It landed. With a dull, unsettling weight. Time stretched. The Baron waved a hand. "Finish and go," he ordered. "Your presence is disruptive." Ethan inclined his head, neither submissive nor defiant, and gathered his tools. Before he turned away, he faced Lyra once more. He did not lower himself this time. He did not need to. "I will be in the service corridor near the hangar for the next hour," he said. "If the chair acts up again, or if the light is still too bright, tell someone to find me." He hesitated, then added, "Or tell me yourself, if you prefer." The choice was new. Lyra swallowed. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, a little stronger than before. He smiled, brief but real, and walked out with the quiet confidence of someone who had done exactly what he believed was right, nothing more, nothing less. Behind him, the hall resumed its careful order, but it was not the same. Lyra sat straighter, eyes reflecting the softened light, and for the first time in a long while, she wondered what else might change if being seen did not require permission. Ethan did not make it all the way to the hangar before the summons came. It was not delivered with alarms or raised voices, just a quiet shift in the corridor lighting and a polite but unmistakable tone from the wall console asking him to return to the central hall. He paused, weighing the cost of ignoring it, then turned back, tools still in hand. Power structures like this did not like unanswered questions, and he had just become one. When he re-entered, the space felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were listening. Lyra was still there, her chair now properly aligned, the light no longer harsh. She noticed him immediately. Her eyes widened a fraction, not with fear, but with uncertainty, as if she was not sure whether he was allowed to come back. Baron Kael'ric stood rather than reclined now, his posture sharp, controlled. "You encourage familiarity," the Baron said, his voice smooth but cold. It confuses those who should remain aware of their place. Ethan set his tool case down slowly. I encourage clarity, he replied. Confusion usually comes from silence. A murmur rippled through the attendants, quickly suppressed. The Baron stepped closer to the edge of the dais, looking down at Lyra rather than at Ethan. My daughter is provided for, he said. Her needs are met. Lyra's hands tightened together. Ethan noticed, not because it was dramatic, but because he had been paying attention since the moment he met her. Needs are more than maintenance, Ethan said. Everyone knows that. The Baron's eyes narrowed. You speak boldly for a contractor. Ethan nodded. I am aware. He turned slightly toward Lyra, careful not to exclude her from a conversation about her own life. May I ask, he said gently, how long you sit here each day? She hesitated, glancing at her father. The pause was answer enough, but she spoke anyway. Most of it, she said. It is efficient. The word sounded borrowed. Ethan let it sit. Efficiency keeps systems running, he said. It does not always keep people well. The Baron's crest flared again, brighter this time. You presume to lecture me on my household, Kael'ric said. You presume to decide what dignity looks like. Ethan met his gaze without raising his voice. Dignity is not something I decide, he said. It is something I recognize. Silence fell hard, the kind that demanded resolution. The Baron lifted one hand, fingers flexing as if weighing an invisible object. You believe your species has a monopoly on such concepts, he said. Ethan shook his head. No, sir. I believe every species understands it. Some simply forget to practice it when it becomes inconvenient. Lyra felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had carried so long it felt like part of her structure. She straightened, just a little. Father, she said, her voice steady despite the way her pulse raced, he did not insult you. Every eye turned to her. Speaking without being prompted was not forbidden. It was simply discouraged. Kael'ric looked at her, really looked, as if reassessing an object he thought he understood completely. You find this acceptable, he said. To be addressed as an equal? Lyra held his gaze. I find it restful, she replied. The word landed softly and changed everything. Ethan said nothing. He did not need to. The idea had already taken root. The Baron's expression hardened, then smoothed over, control reasserting itself. You will finish your contracted work, Kael'ric said to Ethan. Then you will leave my estate. Ethan inclined his head. Yes, sir. He turned to go, then stopped, not to argue, but to speak one last truth. Thank you for allowing me to do my job, he said. All of it. As he walked away, Lyra watched him with eyes that reflected more than light now. They reflected possibility, fragile but undeniable, and for the first time, the hall felt less like a display and more like a place where something might finally begin to change. Ethan finished the last of the diagnostics under escort that kept a careful distance, not hostile, just precise, as if proximity itself needed authorization. The estate systems were stable now, power flowing clean, temperatures normalized, the quiet hum of a well-tended place restored. He signed off on the final panel and returned his tools to their case, fingers lingering a second longer than necessary as if committing the weight of the moment to memory. When he stepped back into the central hall, it was emptier than before. The attendance had thinned. The dais lights were dimmed to a gentler spectrum. Lyra remained, her chair positioned where the floor patterns formed a soft arc instead of a sharp line, a small change that felt deliberate. She noticed him and lifted her chin, a question in her eyes that did not ask permission. You are leaving, she said. It was not a plea. It was an observation. Ethan nodded. In a few minutes. He hesitated, then added, if you want, I can check the service lift by the East Gardens before I go. It tends to drift by an inch or two. Not dangerous, just annoying. Lyra's lips curved into the smallest smile. I would like that, she said. The Baron did not join them. His absence was louder than any command. They moved together through corridors that had never been intended for conversation, Ethan walking at an easy pace that matched the glide of the chair without thinking about it. The gardens were enclosed, climate-controlled, with translucent panels that filtered starlight into something almost like afternoon. Ethan adjusted the lift calibration, tapping values until the platform aligned perfectly, then stepped back. There, he said. Level. Lyra rolled forward and stopped exactly where the floor met the platform, testing the steadiness. She exhaled. You notice many things, she said. I notice what repeats, Ethan replied. Discomfort repeats loudly if you listen. They stood there a moment, sharing the quiet. When you spoke earlier, Lyra said, choosing her words with care, it changed. The room. Ethan shrugged. Rooms change all the time. Not like that, she said. People listened. He considered it. People remember how they feel when someone treats them like they matter, he said. That sticks. Lyra looked down at her hands, then back up. My father believes dignity is granted, she said. Like a title. Ethan shook his head gently. It is practiced, he said. Usually in small ways. A soft chime echoed from the corridor, a signal that his departure window was closing. Ethan lifted his case. I should go. Lyra nodded, then surprised herself by speaking again. Ethan, she said, and when he turned, she met his eyes without flinching, you did not fix me. He smiled, not defensive, not proud. I did not try. No, she said. You reminded me. He inclined his head, accepting the thanks without taking ownership of it. As he reached the exit, a voice carried after him, composed and controlled. Human. Baron Kaelric stood at the threshold, posture restored, expression unreadable. Your contract is complete, the Baron said. You will be compensated. Ethan nodded. Thank you. The Baron's gaze shifted, briefly, to Lyra, then back. You have introduced inefficiencies, Kaelric said. They will require adjustment. Ethan paused. Some adjustments are worth the effort, he replied, careful, respectful, and walked on. The doors sealed behind him with a soft hiss. Lyra remained by the lift, the gardens reflecting violet light into her eyes. The estate resumed its rhythms, but beneath the polished order, something had been unsettled, not broken, simply seen, and for the first time, that felt like progress. The estate felt different after Ethan left, not quieter, but more alert, as if every surface had learned to listen. Lyra noticed it first in the mornings, when the light panels adjusted a fraction slower, no longer snapping to maximum brightness the instant she entered the hall. The change was small enough to be dismissed as calibration drift, but it happened again the next day, and the day after that. She noticed it when an attendant paused before repositioning her chair and asked, politely, if the angle was acceptable. The question startled both of them. Lyra answered yes, then surprised herself by adding, please keep it that way. The words tasted unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Baron Kaelric noticed the changes too. He said nothing at first, observing the subtle inefficiencies accumulating like fine dust. A conversation that took a few seconds longer. A corridor rerouted so Lyra's chair did not have to pass through service traffic. A meal schedule adjusted so she was not always alone. None of it violated protocol. All of it violated expectation. One evening, as the artificial dusk settled into the gardens, Kaelric stood beside her chair, hands clasped behind his back. You seem altered, he said, voice neutral. Lyra looked at the reflection of the stars in the glass canopy. I am paying attention, she replied. The Baron's crest shifted. To what? To myself, she said, then met his gaze. And to how others respond when I speak. Silence followed, not tense, but careful. Caelrix inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the statement without endorsing it. The human will not return, he said. His influence is temporary. Lyra nodded. Influence does not require presence, she said. Only memory. The words echoed something Ethan had said, and she did not apologize for that. Days passed. The estate resumed its schedules, but the small practices continued, unremarkable on their own, undeniable in pattern. Lyra began requesting adjustments herself, not demands, just clear statements. Lower the table by 2 inches. Delay the meeting until the lift is free. Allow the gardens for an hour without observers. Each request was measured, reasonable, difficult to refuse without stating why. Caelrix approved most of them, if only because denial would have required explanation. And explanations had weight. The moment came quietly, as most important moments do. A visiting official arrived, all polished authority and sharp assessments, eyes skimming past Lyra as if she were part of the furniture. He addressed Caelrix exclusively, discussing trade routes and resource quotas, never once acknowledging the figure beside the dais. Lyra waited, feeling the familiar pressure to disappear. Then she remembered Ethan kneeling to her level, the calm certainty of being addressed directly. "Excuse me," she said. The official faltered, words tangling. Caelrix turned, surprised despite himself. Lyra continued, voice steady. "You are standing in my line of sight. Please move to the left." The request was simple. The effect was not. The official complied at once, flustered, suddenly aware. Caelrix watched, something unreadable crossing his features. Later, alone with her, he spoke again. "You challenge conventions," he said. Lyra shook her head. "I participate in them," she replied. "That is the difference." Caelrix considered this, long and carefully. "Participation carries responsibility," he said. Lyra nodded. "I am ready for that." Outside the estate, a cargo shuttle departed the system, its human engineer already on another job, unaware of the quiet recalibration still unfolding behind him. Inside, a daughter once treated as an inconvenience now occupied space with intention. Nothing dramatic had occurred. No declarations. No revolutions. Just a series of small choices, practiced daily, reshaping the gravity of a room. And for the first time, Lyra felt certain of something simple and profound. She had not been given dignity. She had learned how to claim it. The invitation arrived without ceremony, a single line added to Lyra's daily schedule, precise and unmistakable. Strategic Council. Full attendance. Her name was listed, not as an observer, not as an addendum, but in the same weight and size as every other attendee. She read it twice, then once more, feeling the steadiness of the word settle in her chest. When the time came, she entered the council chamber through the main doors, not the side access once designated for convenience. The room was larger than the central hall, circular, designed so no single seat dominated the others. Baron Caelrix was already there, standing rather than seated, a subtle signal to the room that something had shifted. The council members turned as Lyra approached, their assessments quick and unguarded. Some masked surprise. Some did not bother. Lyra positioned her chair at the table without assistance, aligning it carefully so the interface panel sat flush with the surface. The motion was practiced now, unremarkable. "We will begin," Caelrix said, his voice carrying authority tempered by restraint. Discussions unfolded as they always had, numbers and projections, resource flows measured in percentages and margins. Lyra listened, not passively, but actively, tracking the patterns beneath the words. When a proposal surfaced that rerouted shipping through corridors with limited access infrastructure, she spoke. "That route increases efficiency on paper," she said, calm and clear, "but it assumes full mobility at every transfer point. It excludes a segment of our workforce without accounting for adaptation costs." The table went still. A counselor frowned. "Those considerations are secondary," he said. Lyra met his gaze. They are invisible because you do not experience them, she replied. Invisibility does not make them secondary. It makes them unmeasured. Caelrix watched closely, not intervening. The counselor hesitated, then adjusted his data slate, recalculating. The numbers changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The discussion continued, altered in tone, more careful, more precise. When the session ended, no one dismissed Lyra. She dismissed herself, nodding once and gliding from the chamber with quiet assurance. In the corridor beyond, Caelrix caught up to her. You spoke with authority, he said. Lyra considered that. I spoke with accuracy, she replied. Authority followed. He studied her profile, the way she occupied space now, not asking, simply existing. You attribute this change to the human, he said. It was not an accusation. Lyra shook her head. He did not give me words, she said. He gave me a mirror. Caelrix was silent for several steps. The council will resist, he said finally. Systems prefer familiarity. Lyra nodded. So do people, she said. Until familiarity costs more than change. Later that cycle, in her quarters, Lyra reviewed updates sent from multiple departments, each one reflecting small recalibrations, language softened, access widened, assumptions questioned. She did not feel triumphant. She felt grounded. Somewhere beyond the estate, beyond the system, a human engineer continued his work, unaware that a choice he had made without spectacle was still unfolding, still echoing. Lyra closed her display and rested her hands in her lap, steady and sure. The universe had not bent to her will. It had simply made room. And for the first time, that room felt like it belonged to her. The shift did not announce itself with alarms or declarations, only with a subtle tightening of routines that Lyra felt before she could name it. Requests that had once been processed quietly now returned with annotations. Meetings were rescheduled without explanation. Advisors who had grown accustomed to addressing her directly reverted to speaking past her, careful with tone, precise with distance. The council chamber remained circular, but the conversations began to curve away from her presence. Baron Caelrix noticed the pattern and said nothing at first, watching the system correct itself the way systems always tried to do when pressed. Lyra noticed something else. She noticed how quickly the cost of visibility accumulated. A proposal she supported stalled because it required signatures that now came slower. A departmental head cited tradition where efficiency had once sufficed. None of it was hostile. All of it was resistance. One evening, as the estate settled into its controlled twilight, Caelrix summoned her to the overlooking gallery. Where the stars cut clean lines through the glass. There are consequences, he said, hands folded behind his back. Your participation alters alliances. Lyra nodded. Participation reveals them, she replied. He turned, studying her profile. The council will demand assurance, he said. They will want limits. Lyra felt the familiar pull to retreat, to accept partial presence as a compromise. Then she remembered a human engineer kneeling to her level, asking a question no one else had bothered to ask. Limits on what? She said. On influence, Caelrix answered. On precedence. Lyra considered the stars. I will not ask for more than I can carry, she said. But I will not agree to less than I already hold. Caelrix exhaled slowly. They will press me, he said. They will suggest that your role be formalized in ways that confine it. Lyra turned to him. Then let them, she said. Formalization creates records. Records create accountability. The Baron paused, then gave a small, reluctant nod. You have learned to think like a governor, he said. Lyra shook her head. I learned to think like a person who has been excluded, she replied. The next cycle brought the request. A charter revision, elegantly worded, offering Lyra a titled advisory position with clearly defined boundaries. Access without authority. Presence without precedence. It was, by any measure, generous. Lyra read it once, then again, feeling the weight of the choice settle. Accept, and the resistance would soften. Decline, and the pressure would escalate. She requested a single amendment and returned the document unsigned. The council reconvened, tension controlled but unmistakable. You refuse stability, a counselor said. Lyra met his gaze. I refuse containment, she replied. Stability that requires silence is fragile. Murmurs followed, then calculations. Kael'ric spoke, his voice measured. My daughter's position will remain as it stands, he said. Unrestricted by novelty titles. It was not defiance. It was commitment. The room adjusted. Not comfortably. Not completely. But enough. Later, alone in her quarters, Lyra felt the cost fully for the first time, the awareness that every step forward now required endurance. She did not feel afraid. She felt resolved. Somewhere beyond the estate, a human engineer continued his work, unaware that a quiet act of recognition had grown into a test of will. Lyra rested her hands, steady, and accepted the burden she had chosen. Dignity, she understood now, was not only claimed. It was carried. The hearing was scheduled at a time calculated to minimize attention, a procedural review framed as routine governance, but everyone in the chamber understood its purpose. Lyra entered through the main doors again, her chair moving smoothly across the polished floor, the sound soft but unmistakable. The council members were already seated, data slates aligned, expressions composed into neutrality. Baron Kael'ric stood at the center, posture formal, the weight of legacy visible in the set of his shoulders. This session concerns structural clarity, the presiding counselor said. Roles, expectations, and the continuity of authority. Lyra listened without interrupting as arguments were presented with careful language, each one circling the same point without naming it directly. Stability. Predictability. The need to reassure external partners. The implied risk of precedent. When it was her turn, no one announced it. She spoke anyway. You are discussing me as a variable, she said calmly. I would like to clarify the equation. A few heads lifted. She continued, measured, precise. My presence has not reduced efficiency. It has revealed costs previously unaccounted for. My participation has not weakened authority. It has distributed responsibility. A counselor leaned forward. You were not trained for governance, he said. Lyra met his gaze. Neither was I trained to be disregarded, she replied. Yet I learned that role thoroughly. The room stilled. Kael'ric did not intervene. He did not need to. Lyra's voice carried, not loud, but anchored. You ask for limits, she said. Here are mine. I will not accept titles that restrict function. I will not accept access without agency. I will accept scrutiny, because scrutiny is the price of inclusion. The presiding counselor exchanged glances with the others. And if the council denies this, he asked. Lyra nodded once. Then you will formalize exclusion, she said. And every record will show that you chose it knowingly. The words landed with the quiet force of inevitability. Kael'ric stepped forward then, not to dominate, but to align. My daughter speaks with my authority, he said. It was not a declaration of power. It was an acknowledgement of shared ground. The council recessed, not in agreement, but in recognition that delay would no longer diffuse the issue. When the chamber emptied, Lyra remained, feeling the delayed tremor of what she had done. Kael'ric approached her slowly. You have changed the terms, he said. Lyra looked up. At him. You allowed it, she replied. He considered that, then inclined his head. I permitted a human to speak to you as an equal, he said. I did not anticipate the consequences. Lyra's expression softened. Neither did he, she said. That was the point. Later, alone in the gardens, Lyra replayed the moments that had led here, the quiet adjustments, the questions asked without entitlement, the mirror held up without judgment. She realized then what the council had not yet named. The change was not procedural. It was cultural. Somewhere beyond the system, a human engineer finished another job, unaware that his simple recognition had become a fulcrum. Lyra rested beneath the filtered starlight, steady and present. Whatever the council decided next, one truth was now immutable. She had spoken, and the universe had listened. The council decision was released at dawn, not broadcast, simply logged, precise language recorded into the estate archive where policy lived longer than memory. Lyra read it once, then set the display aside. The wording mattered less than the absence of restriction. No narrowed scope. No conditional clauses. Her role remained unchanged, because it was no longer considered an exception. When she entered the central hall later that cycle, the space received her without adjustment. The light did not flare. The attendants did not rush. Nothing needed correction. Baron Kaelric stood near the far window, looking out at the orbital lanes where ships traced slow arcs of departure and arrival. The council accepted continuity, he said without turning. Lyra approached, stopping beside him, close enough that her reflection joined his in the glass. They accepted inevitability, she replied. Kaelrix considered the stars. There was resistance, he said. There will be again. Lyra nodded. Change does not eliminate friction, she said. It teaches us where to reinforce. Kaelrix looked down at her then, not as a measure of utility, but as an assessment of presence. You carry this well, he said. Lyra met his gaze. I was taught how, she replied, and the space between them held the truth of that without accusation. Later, in the gardens, Lyra paused at the lift Ethan had recalibrated weeks ago. It aligned perfectly, as it always had since that day. She rested her hand against the railing, feeling the steady hum, remembering a human voice that had asked if she was comfortable and waited for the answer. Somewhere. Beyond the estate, beyond the system, Ethan Walker finished another repair, signed another contract, and moved on, never knowing how far that question had traveled. He had not stayed. He had not followed. He had simply treated her as someone who mattered, and left the rest to unfold. As the cycle turned, visitors arrived who addressed Lyra directly, not because protocol demanded it, but because precedent now existed. Young attendants watched her navigate halls with confidence and learned, without instruction, where attention belonged. The estate did not celebrate. It adjusted. And adjustment, Lyra had learned, was how cultures evolved. At dusk, as the light softened and the stars reflected violet in her eyes, Lyra allowed herself a moment of stillness. She had not been rescued. She had not been fixed. She had been seen. In a universe that measured worth in power and motion, one human had paused long enough to recognize dignity where others had overlooked it. And that recognition, quiet and unrecorded, had proven stronger than command. The hall remained silent, but the silence was no longer empty. It was complete.